The first thing Nadia noticed about the restaurant was the warmth. It rushed toward her the moment she stepped inside, carrying the scent of baked bread and something sweet she couldn't name. For a second, she just stood there, letting her frozen fingers tingle back to life. The second thing she noticed was him. Omar stood near the window, scanning the entrance with a kind of careful patience that made her chest tighten. He looked exactly like his pictures, tall, neatly dressed, hair combed back, a charcoal coat hanging perfectly from his shoulders. He looked like someone who belonged in places with polished floors and soft golden lights. She looked down at herself. Her coat was the color of yesterday's rain. Faded brown, sleeves slightly frayed at the cuffs, one button replaced with a mismatched plastic one that didn't quite fit. It had been her mother's once. Nadia had promised herself she would buy a new one this winter, something soft and elegant. But life had its own plans: rent, medicine for her father, her younger brother's school fees. A new coat became a luxury that kept moving further down the list. When Omar's eyes finally found her, he smiled. Not a polite, strained smile, a real one, warm and open. She swallowed and walked toward him, feeling the weight of her coat with every step. "Nadia?" he asked gently. "Yes, Omar." He nodded. "I'm really glad you came." She expected his eyes to flicker down to her coat, to pause, to calculate, to reconsider, but he didn't. If he noticed it, he gave no sign. He simply pulled out her chair and waited for her to sit before taking his own. They talked about small things at first: work, traffic, the absurdity of how cold Multan could feel in winter mornings despite its reputation for heat. She found herself laughing more than she expected. His voice was calm, his humor subtle, his questions thoughtful. He listened in a way that made her feel like her words mattered. Halfway through the meal, she excused herself to go to the restroom. In the mirror, she studied her reflection. Her cheeks were flushed, not just from the cold. She looked happy and terrified. This is the part where it changes, she told herself. This is where he notices. This is where he decides I'm not what he imagined. When she returned, Omar was standing near their table. For a second, her heart dropped. Was he leaving? Had something happened? "I thought we could step outside for a minute," he said. "There's a small terrace. The view is nice." Outside, the air was sharper. The city lights shimmered faintly through a thin mist. She hugged her coat tighter around herself, instantly regretting agreeing to this. The cold slipped through the fabric like it wasn't even there. Omar noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she lied, teeth barely chattering. He looked at her coat then, finally. Her stomach twisted. The silence stretched just a little too long. "I should have worn something warmer," she said quickly, trying to laugh it off. "This old thing is exactly winterproof." She wanted to say more, to explain, to make it clear that she wasn't careless, that she owned nicer things, that this coat didn't define her, but the words stuck in her throat. Omar stepped closer, not with judgment but with concern. "Why didn't you tell me you were cold?" he asked softly. "It's nothing, I'm used to it." The moment the words left her mouth, she wished she could take them back. "I'm used to it, used to the cold, used to managing, used to less." His expression changed, but not in the way she feared. It wasn't disappointment. It was something heavier, something like understanding. Before she could react, he unbuttoned his coat. "Omar, what are you?" He slid it gently off his shoulders and placed it around hers. The fabric was thick and warm, carrying a faint scent of his cologne and something clean, like cedar wood. It swallowed her completely, the sleeves far too long. "You'll freeze," she protested, trying to hand it back. "I run warm," he said with a small smile. "And besides, I don't like seeing you uncomfortable." She stared at him, unsure what to say. The city noise below felt distant now, muffled by the sudden rush of warmth spreading through her chest. "You don't have to pretend," she said quietly. "About the coat, I know it's old. I know I don't exactly look like." She gestured vaguely toward the glowing restaurant behind them. This. He frowned slightly. Like what? Like someone who fits into your world. He took a slow breath, as if choosing his words carefully. My world, he repeated. Nadia, my world is not this restaurant or this coat. He nodded toward the one now wrapped around her. It's the people in it. She searched his face for any hint of mockery or pity. There was none. I noticed your coat, he admitted gently. Her heart dropped again. And I thought, he continued, that it must have a story, because you don't seem like someone who holds onto things without a reason. Tears pricked her eyes before she could stop them. It was my mother, she whispered. She passed away 3 years ago. I keep meaning to replace it, but every time I try, I feel like I'm letting go of something. Omar's gaze softened in a way that made her feel seen, not exposed. Then don't replace it, he said. Not until you're ready. There's nothing wrong with carrying pieces of the people we love. The cold wind blew again, but she barely felt it now. I thought you'd leave, she admitted, after seeing me in this. He tilted his head slightly. Why would I leave? Because most people do. Not because of a coat, but because of what it represents. And what does it represent? He asked. Struggle, she said. Responsibility, not being easy. He stepped closer, his voice steady. It represents strength, loyalty, love for your family. If that scares someone away, they're not worth your time. They stayed on the terrace longer than they meant to. Long enough for the waiter to peek outside once, concerned they'd forgotten their table. When they finally went back in, Nadia kept Omar's coat around her shoulders despite her protests. He insisted. She could feel people glance at them, at her oversized coat, at him in just his sweater, but she didn't shrink the way she usually did. Something had shifted. Back at the table, conversation flowed differently now. Deeper, truer. She told him about working extra hours to help her father after his surgery, about tutoring neighborhood kids on weekends, about dreams she'd quietly packed away because they felt too expensive to keep. He listened to all of it, not with the polite interest of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but with genuine attention. When the bill came, she reached for her purse automatically. It's my treat, he said. We agreed to split it, she reminded him. And we can, he replied easily. I just wanted to offer. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Next time, she said, surprising herself. He smiled. Next time. Outside the restaurant, the cold had deepened. She reluctantly slipped out of his coat and handed it back to him. The air hit her immediately, sharper now. He noticed. Without a word, he draped his coat around her again. Omar, I'll walk you to your car, he said simply. They walked side by side under the dim streetlights. The world felt quieter than usual, as if giving space to something fragile and new. At her car door, she finally faced him fully. You know, she said softly, I almost canceled tonight. Why? I didn't want you to see me like this. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm glad you didn't, he said, because this is exactly how I wanted to see you. She searched his eyes again, still half expecting the illusion to crack. But there was no illusion, just sincerity. You wrapped your coat around me, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He smiled gently. That's what you do when someone's cold. She shook her head slightly. No, that's what you do when you're staying. The words hung between them. I'm not planning on leaving, he said quietly. For the first time in a long while, Nadia felt something unfamiliar but steady settle inside her. Security. Not the kind that comes from money or perfect appearances. The kind that comes from being accepted exactly as you are. Old coat, heavy responsibilities, guarded heart and all. She drove home that night still wearing his coat. He had insisted she keep it until their next date. Inside her small bedroom, she hung it carefully beside her mother's old one. The two coats brushed against each other, different in fabric and color, but equal in warmth. For years, she had believed that love required presenting a polished version of herself, that she had to hide the frayed edges, the patched-up places, the signs of surviving. But tonight, someone had seen the frayed edges and chosen to wrap warmth around them instead of walking away. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to replace her old coat to deserve something new.